Hello, everybody. Welcome to our broadcast of Tele-ABA versus in-home therapy. So we'll go ahead and go to our PowerPoint slide that we have. So first, we'd like to introduce our different groups. To start off, we have our first team of Tele-ABA-based therapy. First on the team is Alex. So let her introduce herself.
Hi, my name's Alex Cardenas, and I'm in my third semester here at Ball State University's ABA Master's Program, and I've experience in early intervention and home-based intervention services.
My name is Brandon Kern. I'm also in my third semester at Ball State, the ABA Master's Program. And currently, I work with children that are on the autism spectrum in a school system, working on as a one-on-one aide. For our next team, we have our home-based therapy team. We'll have Sarah.
My name is Sarah Helen, and I'm in my fifth semester at Ball State University in the ABA Master's Program. I currently work with clients on the spectrum, and I've been working with them for about 3 years in a clinical setting.
Hi, my name is Marissa, and this is my third semester in the ABA Master's Program. I have been working with kids on the spectrum, ages 3 to 12, for about 12 years in a clinical setting.
Okay, so on the Tele-ABA side of the debate, telehealth, which is another way that I found it was referred to in research. So telehealth can provide a vital resource for populations from rural communities who are often underserved. Just to see how bad this problem is, I included a map of the United States, and medically underserved areas are highlighted in green. So you could just see how shocking the problem really is. So in terms of these rural communities, children with developmental disabilities are no exception to these underserved communities, and they will go without appropriate services and supports. So this means children with developmental disabilities who engage in serious or challenging behavior and reside in these rural communities are at a double disadvantage. So according to case studies, BCBAs are in short supply in these rural communities. And for example, Oregon is a largely rural and frontier state, meaning it has counties with less than 6 people per square mile. And the state reported 3.899 million people, according to the United States Census. However, only 19 BCBAs and 4 BCBA doctorals have registered on the Behavior Analyst Certification Board's website. So a solution for this I found was university-based outpatient clinics that play an important role in serving families of children with ASD who reside in these geographically remote areas. And these types of clinics do have their disadvantages. There's the long wait lists, which can make challenging behavior more difficult since these families have to wait for long periods of time before they can get services. And traveling to an outpatient clinic from a rural area is also difficult because of logistical concerns like arranging childcare for siblings and transportation. So thankfully, the use of relatively inexpensive technology that is usually available in many homes allow researchers and program evaluators across geographic locations to obtain and share repeated behavioral observations of children in their natural setting. So according to recent research articles, a growing number of studies have evaluated the use of telehealth to assess and treat classroom challenging behavior for children with developmental disabilities. Also to implement other common educational assessments such as preference assessments, and also to train teachers who work with children with developmental disabilities in evidence-based practices. Other studies have evaluated the use of telehealth to deliver parent education and coaching in evidence-based intervention to parents of children with ASD. So each of all of these points I mentioned from the studies reported that parents training delivered via telehealth produced positive effects on parent acquisition of target strategies. According to a 2013 study by Wacker and several colleagues, which can be found in our reference section, there's just way too many to list out. Anyhow, they found that telehealth equipment can be used at regional clinics to support parents of children with ASD to implement functional analysis procedures. So Wacker and colleagues have also shown that telehealth can be used to train parents of children with ASD at regional clinics to implement functional communication training packages following identification of the function of their child's challenging behavior with a functional analysis. So this regional telehealth model used by Wacker and colleagues has the advantage of providing behavioral consultation to family at regional host sites where personnel can support the parent implementing the functional analysis by organizing materials and providing emotional support and encouragement. Other advantages of this regional telehealth model include the use of more controlled settings, which helps ensure the safety of parents and children. Distractions are more limited. It could also contribute to conclusive functional analysis results and aiding families that need long-term support to implement interventions in their home during naturally occurring routines. Does anyone have any rebuttal or discussion?
Yes, Alex, I do. This is Sarah. What would you do about clients who are in poverty? So how would you be able to get resources needed to be able to receive the Tele-ABA?
I'm sorry, you said clients that are what now?
The clients that are in poverty?
Oh, in poverty. Yeah, I mean, according to the research is actually very limited about telehealth or tele-ABA. And from what I found, there wasn't much about, yet most of these people are probably, or not most, maybe probably a lot are in poverty. So in terms of them having like the actual technology, some type of program would have to be implemented where they can get assistance for that, which I'm sure would still be a feasible thing as long as the state gets involved, you know?
No, I completely agree with you, and I think you did an amazing job with your research. That was really the only question that I had, and I completely agree that I think that it would be good for us to have some sort of government assistance for those kiddos or for those clients that
Right.
need
In the perfect world,
assistance.
that would happen. And, hopefully we can, because it's just really sad to think that so many people are just going without services just because of their location and economic stance.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it also depends on where they live and like what state or what country. There's different services provided based on that. But I think a lot of it, as she kind of discussed, like since this Tele-ABA is covering a problem, as this gets more research and we're able to get the Tele-ABA out, because this is still kind of like a open discussion, I guess, within our field. As it gets more out, I feel like Medicaid and some of these other programs that enable people that don't have the funds for it to get these services. I think as these kind of things get more out, we'll be able to open that to more people.
No, for sure. I completely agree with you, Brandon. I just thought that it was a interesting question to bring up just because I think that it would be good for our viewers who are watching to be able to kind of get that in their head about Tele-ABA, with it being so new, that would be good for them to kind of, if they want to, go down this alley, that those are some things that they would have to consider if they want to introduce Tele-ABA into their clinics.
Yeah,
sure.
for sure.
Yeah, and later we'll actually be discussing some of the economic benefits of it and that exact kind of thing. That's one of our later points. So we'll hit that even more later. So
perfect. I look forward to it.
So one pro about home-based therapy is the opportunity that families have to build close relationships with one another. Families are able to see firsthand how social interactions, communication, and behavior management is handled in their own home in the most natural way. With these following benefits, families learn the best approaches that are the most appropriate for their child's needs. Parents and/or guardians are offered individualized time to demonstrate how activities can be carried out in their natural environment of their home. According to Pereira, all of the child's learning happens in their natural environment with familiar people. And that's the benefit that the child gains when they are building their relationship with their family. Home-based therapy brings families together by having the parents carry out interventions at home in the role of a full-time therapist. So should there be any instances where the parents or family members need the most intrusive prompt, the practitioner will be there to model and assist in person while fading out the assistance and encouraging independence. For example, some interventions require face-to-face social play interactions with an adult, could be a parent, older sister, dad, etc. But if there's a need of immediate feedback or adjustment within the setting of the home, home-based therapy provides that opportunity for the practitioner to arrange the environment instantly. This allows the family to learn the most effective, natural way. Nonetheless, it enables them to connect with one another, understand one another, and share each other's interests that they weren't unaware of before. So here is a quote from Pereira. The child and the parents were reviewed once a month to provide further support and guidance regarding difficulties faced in implementing activities and to discuss other possible play options. The total time spent in educating and training mothers was about 7 hours during the study. A senior clinician assisted by 3 junior clinicians with over 5 years of experience with autism was associated in the training of mothers. So as you can see, with home-based therapy, parents and family members are given lots of opportunities to learn different methods and different ways of handling behaviors and the interventions. Does anybody have anything to add into that?
This is Alex here. I definitely have experience with home-based interventions, and I totally agree with everything you had to say about it. I have seen the difference it does make when they're in their natural setting, you know, at home where they feel safe, as opposed to being at school, where I also have experience at a therapy center at a school. It does make a big difference being at home, and especially with their caretaker. That's implementing the intervention. So I definitely agree with your points.
Awesome.
The other thing that I could kind of, beef up our side for the in-home therapy with some of my experiences is I've actually seen firsthand that, there are some things that you can conduct in a clinical setting, but then, in order to get things, generalized, it would be better to conduct those therapies in home and for the parents to actually see that those implementations are being conducted correctly in the home. So for instance, like I have experience with one client with some behavioral problems. We've conducted some of those implementations in the home, and then we've also done in the clinical setting, but it had been more beneficial when it was done in the home with the parent training.
So something else that I've also come across with like in-home therapy, as you were talking, So one such client that I've worked for, because I've also done in-home therapy, the parents kept telling me about a behavior they kept seeing, but every time since I was there, the observer, the behavior immediately stopped. Or I feel like that can maybe sometimes be an issue with in-home therapy. Is sometimes we're going to do observations to try to see the behavior. Necessarily, it might not happen simply because you are there.
Yeah, I've definitely witnessed that too. And it is frustrating for the parents when they're trying to, get services for certain behaviors, and then, we can't observe them. So it kind of delays things.
Yeah.
Brandon, I like what you said. It's kind of like when your teacher comes into class. Everybody is loud. All the students are going all over the place. They're jumping on the tables, writing on the board. But then as soon as your teacher comes in or the principal comes in, everybody is back to their more appropriate behaviors, sort of.
Yep.
Thank you guys for sharing.
Or if you have like a different observer too. So like sometimes kids act differently in front of their parents when they do in front of other people. So I think that's where Tele-ABA may be, a good option, because you may be able to not actually be there, but be able to observe different behaviors that you might not normally see if you were actually in the home.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
So, and what's great about that is it actually goes into our next slide perfectly. So in our next, we're talking about, this, how the behavioral telehealth consultation can help and families and such. So in one such study that we found, according to the study, the behavioral telehealth consultation of families and children with autism spectrum disorder by Malik and we have very complicated names. They use desktop video conferencing. There was utilized in the facility to facilitate the behavioral consultation at a distance with 3 parents of school age, each school children having autism. The parents were supported via a desktop video teleconferencing as they conducted a functional analysis and were found to effectively learn and implement key components of ABA therapy, such as the parents could implement antecedent manipulation strategies, functional communication training, and consequence-based strategy. This study also found that Tele-ABA was found to permit behavior specialists to spend added time with the families to have more intensive and long-term support that they needed, as well as to facilitate that parent involvement in the assessment and treatment challenges of the behavior. So what we saw here was the fact that the therapist wasn't actually there. They were able to use a broadcast and be able to actually coach the parents on how to use these different strategies, and that they were able to effectively implement them. And so this, as we were talking about earlier, one of the struggles of ABA of in-home therapy was the fact that they couldn't, if they're there, that might actually change behavior. With this, they're able to watch and give the parents guidance and direction and teach them in order to be able to do it. So that way, that part of it isn't involved. And the parents were able to completely implement this strategy effectively. So this study also clearly demonstrated that the TELA model of behavior consultation would be used effectively. First of all, conducting the functional behavior interview with the parents, well, that was immediate because they were right there. They were able to coach the parents in the implementation of the functional analysis of the child's challenging behaviors, and then further assessing the challenging behaviors. And then they were able to help to decrease those challenging behaviors and facilitate the parents' involvement in the assessment. Because one of the things that with in-home services, sometimes facilitating parents can be a little bit more difficult. With this, they have to be involved. And I think that was a good thing about this study, and a good thing about telehealth is the parents are involved. And so it's a natural generalization from the parents, from the therapist. So any other thoughts, ideas, or discussions?
I'm on the Tele-ABA side, so yes, 100% agree with, making it bridges the therapist and parents in a way where, it's kind of like, I don't want to say hidden camera situation, but, for the client, having a therapist there could definitely add its challenges if they're there like live in person as opposed to remote.
Yeah, this is Sarah. I'm on the in-home side, and Brandon, I agree with the statement that you had posted, and kind of going back to the point that I made earlier. I think that it is a good option considering, if we do use Tele-ABA, we may be able to see some behaviors that we normally don't see if we're actually in the home or in the environment that the client is located in. So I think that's a good option for people to consider when they're considering Tele-ABA over just sending someone in an in-home setting.
Well, and I think what a lot of this study really covered, because one of the biggest worries about in-home or I mean, is the fact that the therapist isn't actually there. And so is it considered ethical when the therapist, the one who has gone to school for it, who has had all this vast amounts of training, is it appropriate to be able to have a parent be able to actually implement, these different therapies? And according to the study, as well as several others we found, the answer was yes. In almost all of the cases, there was only a few that the parents performed at an okay level. Most of the time, the parents were able to perform as directed by the therapist. And so even though that the therapist isn't necessarily directly there, they're able to completely observe the behavior, direct the parent in the behavior. And one of the things that when I was researching this, I kind of worried about was, are the parents able to, such as if there's a reinforcement, is the therapist able to tell them in enough time, like, oh, hey, you need to reinforce right there, or you're going to miss this opportunity. And it did talk about that there was some issues with that, but for the most part, the parents were able to do that, and they were able to effectively do these therapies.
No, I completely agree. Okay, so for our next point in pro for in-home therapy is when a BCBA or a therapist is able to come into the home and implement the treatments. And with being able to implement those treatments, the parents are able to learn those treatments quickly. So according to Carrasco and Fox, in the present study, there were parents that quickly learned and implemented treatment techniques and who observed evidence of their success through positive change in their child's behavior, some in as short as 4 weeks. There were other parents that needed more time to learn the same strategies, implement them successfully, and witness their positive effects on their children's behavior. The findings from the study suggest that most parents can acquire skills that result in positive outcomes in 8 weekly treatment sessions. So this quote was taken from a study where they were able to provide treatment to people who were less fortunate, meaning providing behavioral support in the homes for these families is beneficial, as they probably do not have the resources to be able to have electronics that will support Tele-ABA. So for families with these demographics, we can actually go in their home is probably the best option for them. And then with, according to Carrasco and Fox, they basically stated that they were able to kind of get that in-home training done fairly quickly with actually being in the home. Any rebuttals or discussions on this topic?
This is Alex here. My just main concern about that is just with the therapist shortages that we experience. Yeah, I agree that parents who are trained and do actually get the services by the therapist to come home, like, yes, they will definitely benefit and they can learn the treatments. But, there's just really not enough therapists to go around to all these people's houses. So what is the solution to that? How is this something that could be amended just with strictly in-home parenting training?
Yeah. So, like kind of what we discussed earlier, maybe there could be some governmental assistance to be able to provide, some therapists in the home, but then that also may mean that, some clinics end up using both techniques, but parents that are not able to um, afford the technique of Tele-ABA, then we are able to provide them with an actual therapist to be able to actually travel to the home.
Well, one of the things that I've seen, so the state that I live in doesn't really have the ABA model set up, but one of the things we do have is that Medicaid actually pays for most of the services here. If you're under a certain demographic money-wise, you can get services completely paid for, which is amazing. But the other issue of it is if we're all, specifically focusing on that, then that stretches that government funding a lot thinner. For an example, I was actually looking at moving to Utah to do these kind of services, but it's a lot more difficult to service there because Utah has a higher percentage of people with developmental disabilities. And so those positions of in-home services are paid like half the rate just because of the volume of there, even though a lot of it is paid through medical assistance. There's just too many of them. And again, it's not only is there not enough clinicians to service them, but there's no money for the clinicians there because it is all paid by that. So I think that's also another issue to consider. Whereas with if we're only doing in-home, then that issue is still going to stand.
No, I completely agree. That makes sense. And here in Indiana, we Medicaid is actually taking charge of a lot of what other insurance companies aren't able to provide for our clients as well. So hopefully that means that we'll be able to provide more resources to people who are not able to provide are not able to get the services that they need. So like, for instance, I work for a non-for-profit currently right now. And so we do a good job by raising money throughout the year for our clients who are not able to pay for services. So, and we also help, clients that can't pay it in full. So if their insurance company is able to pay part of it, but they're not able to pay the rest of it, then that's where we come in and be able to provide them with the additional support that they need so they are able to get those services.
So for our next point on Tele-ABA, I want to talk about the economic benefit of it. So with Tele-ABA, telecommunications technologies, such as like video conferencing, assist the researchers in obtaining the assessment data that are usually like really costly to obtain. Because they have that video conferencing, they can attain it much quicker, much easier. Also with the telemodel, the home-based behavioral consultation can save organizations money by spending for like the travel all the way from home to home. Now, mostly we're talking about here, such as like if a family is in Alaska, they're in a remote place where they're not able to receive home-based services, and if they were, it would take a therapist a long time to travel in order to be able to get to these people. So most companies will pay them for that time because they're traveling for whether it be hours or days or however long they're traveling. this home-based services can allow them to be able to get that that service. This also decreases not just the travel time, but it also can decrease with the therapist being able to actually be there. And so since that essentially is going to be the same cost, they're able to do it more efficiently and more effectively because they're right there in the home immediately and able to observe and talk with and work with the parents. And so on the economic benefit of this is that there are cheaper ways to be able to get these services to people. So as we were talking about earlier, those that are having difficulty, they could also use this as a way to cut the cost for maybe those that are struggling economically. Instead of sending someone in their home, they could do a teleconferencing or such like that. Because most time, even at least in the United States, a lot of the more poor community are required by schools now to have different technology and stuff like that. So that technology, even for the poor demographic, is having more options and more eligibility to get a hold of technology in order to be able to have this home-based services via telecommunication. And so I think this is a great way to be able to supplement data cost and traveling costs of the behavioral consultations. Any other thoughts or comments?
Brandon, I completely agree with what you were saying about the economic benefits of telecommunication in terms of not providing mile reimbursement to the therapists and to also, being able to provide maybe some more service hours to the clients based on, low costs. And then I like how you kind of put a spin on it in terms of, different demographic clients, based upon their financial need and being able to get those different types of services, through Tele-ABA. I also think that, going, back to in-home, I think that we could also provide, low cost services for our clients, with being able to allow some of the therapists or BCBAs to travel to the home as well, to be able to reach, some different types of clients as well, who may not be able to afford some of the tele or the electronics that provides that telehealth.
Well, I think another thing to point out is a lot of states also have programs for people to get technology, such as one of the clients that I work with that has like no verbal abilities. They were able to get a special tablet completely by Medicaid where they can press the buttons, and we've been able to do some functional communication training with them based on that, so they can use that. So there is other ways as well. So like if someone who is in a poor demographic and for some reason not available, there are several programs out there as well that'll enable them to get a hold of technology so they could still have this. Because I feel like that's kind of one thing that I've thought about is how some of the poorer people would be able to get a hold of technology, but especially for those that have developmental disabilities, there's programs out there to help them get a hold of it.
Good point.
I would also have to think that the amount of money that companies will save in terms of travel expense and, paying for one therapist to be at one home and another therapist to be at another home, with the Tele-ABA, it's just like instantly, so you could serve more clients in a shorter amount of time. So what I want to say is with all that money companies are saving, maybe they can just provide their clients with laptops. You know, it might even, the upfront cost is more, but in the long term, it would probably end up saving a lot of money.
Yeah. Right. Any other thoughts for this? Or so moving on, we have our final thoughts. So in our final thoughts for the Tele-ABA, we determined that in terms of professional and ethical code compliances for behavior analysts, there are a few codes that can be addressed with Tele-ABA, such as Code 2.0, responsibility of clients. In regards to the underserved communities of Tele-ABA, they can make a huge impact in operating for the best interests of these locations, since they'll no longer be underserved. It also will be focused on Code 2.09, which is the client's right to effective treatment, which again, Tele-ABA can provide effective treatments to those underserved populations who would otherwise be put on a long wait list or not addressed at all. Since there is growing evidence of the effectiveness of Tele-ABA being successful within behavior consultations, or FBAs, behavioral interviews for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families, Tele-ABA does have the possibility to become an evidence-based practice that can be widely offered to clients. I hope that Tele-ABA is something that we can see in our futures as ABA therapists. And so I think for our final thoughts is that Tele-ABA does have a future. It does need more research within this field, but it shows a very promising and bright future.
In terms of our final thoughts for the in-home therapy, so with in-home therapy, I think that we'll be able to kind of bring the families closer with being able to provide them, correct treatment. So again, we used ethical code 2.0, so responsibility to the client, and then also 2.9, so treatment, interventions, efficacy. But then also, I think that, in-home therapy has been around for a long time to allow, the BCBA or the therapist to come in and be able to implement treatments, and being able to implement those treatments through research, we have seen that those clients can learn those treatments fairly quickly when someone is brought into the home. So we hope that in-home therapy doesn't go away for good. But then again, Tele-ABA did bring up some really good points to the table. And I think Tele-ABA is sort of where the future is going in terms of the technology that we have readily available to us. But hopefully in-home therapy and Tele-ABA can kind of partner together depending on what treatment is best for the client.
Yeah, and I think we can both agree because with this, and I think that's kind of our group's final thought together, is that both kind of have their position of what they could be really useful for. I don't think, as you were stating and as you kind of stated before, that in-home therapy, it's going to stay because it's very effective. We have those researched. It is a research method to where it is proven to work, whereas Tele is still at the beginning of being researched. But I think it does have the potential to help in places where in-home might not be able to. Though in-home does, as you guys stated previously, it can affect parents stronger since the therapist is there. And so both have their benefits. And so I feel like our final thing is both are good and both are needed, but Tele-ABA needs to be continuously be further researched.
In terms of my final thoughts, I think that home-based ABA and Tele-ABA therapy are essential for teaching families and parents the interventions, behavior management skills, and communication skills specifically directed towards the needs of their child. But I also believe that when determining which approach the family should choose, the strengths and weaknesses of the child should be considered to effectively implement ABA accordingly. Should the child be in need of a BCBA to implement certain interventions, but there's only a limited number of BCBAs within the state they live in, then the family might want to consider Tele-ABA. On the other hand, if the family is large in quantity of family members within the household, then home ABA might be an option to consider for the benefit of the family and the child's relationship.
All right. Any other final thoughts?
Nope, I think we covered it.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining our presentation. So these were our ethical codes that we used. We also have a list of our references here. We also will post our references up on with this. All right. So thank you, everyone, for joining us in this debate of tele therapy and in-home versus in-home.